This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Lokwe. So tonight's top stories. The final Southeast Asian stop for China's leader trying to temper US-induced tariff pain. Cambodia facing some of the highest levies, also standing to gain from closer ties with Beijing. Tokyo, one of the first to make its pitch to cut those levies. The US president touting big progress, but the Japanese prime minister warning he is in no rush to make concessions to reach a deal. It's not just tariffs. The World Trade Organization warning their attendant uncertainty could act as a brake on global growth. The world's biggest contract chipmaker says it's confident, though, it can ride out the trade war, keeping its growth outlook unchanged for the year. The South Korean U-turn on enrolment for medical students proposed by now impeached president. Reforms that would have hiked numbers, sparking more than a year of protest and walkouts. And also on East Asia Tonight, Japan, a country known for pushing the limits of technological innovation, is falling behind in digital competitiveness. We look into what Tokyo is doing to catch up. Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Cambodia for the final leg of his three-nation tour of Southeast Asia. His visits have seen him double down on earlier calls to oppose hegemony and power politics amid an escalating trade war with the United States. Talks with Cambodian officials are now underway. Prior to his arrival, Mr. Xi praised the resilience of China-Cambodia relations amid global shifts, expressing Beijing's desire to deepen political trust and strategic cooperation in order to bolster regional and global stability. Beijing has been actively reinforcing ties with ASEAN, aiming to, quote, tear down walls and expand trade alliances. This comes as Beijing faces 145% in additional tariff rates on U.S. imports, while Phnom Penh stares down the barrel of a 49% import duty, one of the highest rates globally before most duties were paused until July. And for more, we're joined by CNA's Olivia Xiong reporting live from Phnom Penh. Olivia, meetings between Mr. Xi and Cambodian leaders are underway. Now, you have been keeping track of Mr. Xi's visit across these three nations in Southeast Asia. The agenda today, what would that be different for Cambodia?
Wei Su, I just want to say that whether it was under the blazing hot sun earlier in the day or the downpour that we saw just moments before we came live to you, President Xi's state visit to Cambodia rolling on. He wasted no time from the moment his plane touched down here in Phnom Penh. He was received by the Cambodian king personally on the tarmac, where he was also then greeted with a welcome ceremony and inspected a guard of honor. It is rare for the Cambodian king to personally receive a visiting foreign dignitary, and it speaks to the kind of significance that Cambodia is placing on this state visit and the personal relationship that has been touted between these two leaders as well. Now, according to state media, the king is a regular visitor to China and has met President Xi several times. He was also received by Hun Sen, the former prime minister and now the president of the Senate, and the two of them being described as close friends as well. And behind me, in that building where you see a flag, it's a bit far away, but just down that road, President Xi expected to meet the current Prime Minister and the son of the former PM Hun Sen, the current Prime Minister Hun Manet, where they'll be having talks as well. But beyond personal and historical ties being talked about, the economic relationship between China and Cambodia in very key focus here. China is Cambodia's largest trading partner. It is also its largest foreign investor. And over here, we are talking about new infrastructure that have been built, airports, seaports, roads, as well as many changes to the landscape here. And I was asking local Cambodians what they thought about this increase in Chinese investment. Have a listen.
ในสมัยយើងអភិវឌ្ឍចឹងណាការអត់មានបរទេសមកវិនិយោគទុនសម្រាប់ខ្មែរអត់សូវមាន
លក់ទៅដាច់ទេដល់មានបរទេសមកច្រើនទៅលក់អីវ៉ាន់ដាច់គួរសមចិនច្រើនចិនបរទេសកម្ពុជាយើងហ្នឹង
វាសប្បាយដែរទីផ្សារស្រុកខ្មែរអាចដើរទៅលលូនហើយប្រជាជនស្រុកខ្មែរអាចមានការងារធ្វើច្រើនវាអាចចាក់ផុតពីអាការដែលតែចំណាក់ស្រុកណាបងបាទ
And President Xi's message we have seen has been clear since the time he arrived here in Cambodia and throughout this Southeast Asian tour that he has been on, trying to build ties with other countries as it faces this escalating trade war with the U.S. In an article published before he arrived, President Xi calling on China and Cambodia to oppose hegemony, power politics, and bloc confrontation. But how substantive or what sort of position the two countries will come to at the end of this visit still remains to be seen. Wei Su.
All right, of course, Cambodia, you mentioned those personal and historic ties between Cambodia and China. But the present also, as you mentioned, ties difficult tariffs possibly lying ahead for Cambodia, 49%. That's its rate of potential tariffs from the United States. So it does need to balance relations with China with those it has with the United States.
That's exactly right, Wei Su, and that is the dilemma that faces Cambodia and the other Southeast Asian nations that President Xi has been visiting. For Cambodia, analysts I've been speaking to say that this may very well be a test of its so-called ironclad relationship, friendship rather, between China and Cambodia, as Cambodia is in the midst of negotiating some sort of reprieve from this 49% duties that has been levied on its goods into the U.S. Tariffs expected to hit the country hard as it's extremely export dependent. I was speaking to the American Chamber of Commerce here in Cambodia, and they say that they are already feeling the impact of it, given the uncertainty. Despite this 90-day pause, there are buyers in the U.S. that have already stopped orders. The estimate also from a survey that they have done of 300 Cambodian factories is that about a third of them could close if these tariffs go into effect. And so there is a lot riding on these talks with the U.S. and on these talks that are happening right now here in Phnom Penh. Have a listen.
If the U.S. Trade Representative sees Cambodia as a potential transshipment, a leakage of Chinese goods, then it's going to be bad for Cambodia, and Cambodia won't be able to resolve the tariff conflict with the U.S. And the U.S. may be forced to impose tariffs on Cambodia simply because they don't want to risk allowing Chinese goods to flow through Cambodia. So right now, the Cambodian government is working to draft procedures and plans to control and to prevent future transshipment.
Well, it's just started raining again, and perhaps emblematic of some of the storm clouds on the economic front. But we do know that the Cambodian Prime Minister has said that Cambodia officials, or rather have said that the country is seeking cooperation, further cooperation with China, including on infrastructure development. So the analysts say the question is whether Cambodia will continue to stay loyal to Beijing and whether it will be rewarded as a result, particularly Cambodia looking for more firm commitments on an infrastructure project, a $1.7 billion project to help build the Funan Techno Canal project. And records, however, have shown that China did not provide any new loans to Cambodia last year amid its own economic headwinds. And so that will be something to look out for when the joint statements come out after the meetings. Also, President Xi calling on the two countries to intensify efforts to crack down on cross-border telecom and online fraud, particularly targeting scam centers that we have seen make headlines here in Cambodia. So lots to talk about and lots to watch out for. Wei Su.
Thanks. CNA's Olivia Xiong there amidst a sudden change in weather, perhaps, as she says, reflecting a very volatile world trade environment. CNA's Olivia Xiong reporting live there from Phnom Penh. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has cautioned that future tariff negotiations with the United States will not be easy following high-level talks. President Donald Trump, though, touting, quote, big progress in discussions. The Japanese delegation, led by Economic Revitalization Minister Ryosei Akazawa, told U.S. representatives that tariffs were, quote, extremely regrettable, requesting that the U.S. review those measures. Mr. Akazawa says he believes Washington is looking to secure a deal within the 90-day window, and that Mr. Trump's presence during those negotiations shows willingness to cede ground.
日米間で以下の点について一致いたしました。双方が率直にかつ建設的な姿勢で協議に臨み、可能な限り早期に合意し、首脳間で発表できるよう目指すということが一つ。2番目がですね、次回の協議を今月中に実施するべく日程調整をすること。そして3番目が閣僚レベルに加え、事務レベルでの協議も継続すること。今回の協議も踏まえつつ、引き続き政府一丸となって最優先かつ全力で取り組んでまいりたいと思います。
And Japan releasing its trade figures for March, export growth coming in below expectations at 3.9% on year. Shipments to the U.S., that's Japan's second largest trading partner, saw a 3.1% rise last month, although figures do not reflect the full impact of Mr. Trump's tariffs. The World Trade Organization warns that tariffs from the U.S. could send global trade plunging this year. It slashed its forecast of the volume of world merchandise trade from solid growth to a decline, despite Washington offering, as we mentioned earlier, that 90-day reprieve on reciprocal tariffs. The WTO has raised the alarm over the possibility of a deeper slump if the U.S. president carries through on his toughest levies. Ross Cullen tells us more.
Well, the World Trade Organization on Wednesday painted a gloomy picture of the international commercial landscape for 2025, saying that trade will decline by 0.2%. That's a real change from its original prediction in October last year of growth for trade of 3%. However, there's another caveat that the World Trade Organization pointed out, saying that if the current trade tensions continue to deteriorate, there could be a contraction of minus 1.5%. Now, the ongoing tit-for-tat tariffs imposed on each other's economies by the United States and China, that formed a major part of the World Trade Organization's thinking. And the Director General, Nkosi Okonjo-Iweala, well, she pointed out those tensions between Beijing and Washington in her remarks to a news conference.
This level of a drop in US-China trade of the magnitudes we are talking about is virtually tantamount to a decoupling of the two economies. With this, whilst US-China trade accounts for only around 3% of world merchandise trade, a decoupling between the two major economies could have far-reaching consequences. If it were to contribute to a broader fragmentation of the global economy along geopolitical lines into two isolated blocks, our estimates suggest that global real GDP would be lowered by nearly 7% in the long term.
Well, the WTO's chief economist, Ralph Osser, also addressed that news conference, and he said, quote, tariffs are a policy lever with wide-ranging and often unintended consequences.
The disruption in US-China trade is expected to trigger significant trade diversion, raising concerns among third markets about increased competition from China. As trade is redirected, Chinese exports are projected to rise by 4 to 9% across all regions outside North America. At the same time, U.S. imports from China are expected to fall sharply in sectors such as textiles, apparel, and electrical equipment, creating new export opportunities for other suppliers.
Well, the WTO called for a clear-eyed view in light of the ongoing trade tensions. And overall, it was a negative picture from the World Trade Organization, although there were some positive points. It said that services growth in Europe this year would be 5%, and for Asian economies, the services exports will increase 4.4% this year and 5.1% next year. Ross Cullen, CNA, Paris.
And still ahead on East Asia tonight, China's tech giants come to the rescue of local exporters amid trade tensions. And Japan's ANA and Singapore Airlines deepen their commercial partnership. They will begin revenue-sharing flights between Singapore and Japan from September. Well, it's time now for business news with Roland Lim. Roland, Chinese online retailers cutting their spending on U.S. digital advertising.
You heard right, Wei Su. And that means higher costs for U.S. consumers and loss of revenue for social media platforms, including Meta. We'll have more on that. But first, Taiwan's TSMC reporting yet another quarter of stellar growth. It saw a 60% profit surge, beating forecasts. Despite U.S. President Trump's unpredictable trade policies, the world's largest contract chip maker said it still expects robust growth this year. Still, investors are expressing growing concerns. CNA's Victoria Jen reports.
TSMC reported over $11 billion in net profit for the first quarter, beating expectations thanks to booming demand for AI chips from major clients like Apple and Nvidia. But in its latest earnings call, the company said U.S. tariff threats are real and that they are keeping a close watch. Now, TSMC is already trying to get ahead of the curve by committing to spend $100 billion into building fabs, packaging plants, and R&D centers in Arizona. Executives say that the overseas investment will dilute profit margins by 2 to 3% each year, and possibly up to 4% in the later phases due to higher costs. Meantime, investors are jittery. TSMC shares are down by more than 20% this year, with fears that rising costs and trade tensions could chip away at long-term growth. Still, TSMC insists it will continue to keep Taiwan as its core, while diversifying globally to manage geopolitical risk. But with tariffs looming, rising costs aboard, and uncertainty in Washington, the chip giant faces one of its toughest balancing acts yet. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
The Bank of Korea has held its benchmark interest rate steady amid concerns that President Trump's tariffs will boost inflation. Now, it's among global central banks that have already preparing their first responses to cushion the impact of the tariff chaos. Policymakers kept rates unchanged at 2 3/4% as widely expected. The pause gives officials more time to monitor price trends after consumer inflation unexpectedly rose last month. It also stabilizes the Korean won after the currency slipped near its weakest level in 16 years, raising the risk of renewed price pressure from costly imports. Now, the won fluctuated after the decision, now strengthening a touch as equities extend their gains. The Bank of Korea and other central banks alike are facing a dilemma in the light of an escalating trade war, which has cast a cloud over growth prospects for nations that depend on global commerce. Japan's all Nippon Airways will begin operating revenue-sharing flights with Singapore's flag carrier starting September under a new joint venture. Under the agreement signed at a ceremony today, passengers will pay the same price for flights between Singapore and Tokyo, operated by either airline. Now, they say the new joint venture will allow them to go beyond existing code-share partnerships to offer more options to passengers and better coordination of flight schedules. ANA and SIA hope to expand the scope of the joint venture in future to include other key markets such as Australia, India, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Now, CNA's Michio Ishida sits down with Singapore's Airlines CEO, that's Goh Chun Pong, to find out more on the outlook for aviation and the joint venture.
What that means is that we will have share revenues on those flights, particularly between Japan and Singapore. So this is not merely cooperation that generates revenue, but more importantly, from our perspective, and I'm sure from my partner's perspective as well, it adds a lot of convenience to our customers, more connectivity, and we are also looking at enhancing cooperation in the frequent flyer space as well as corporate traveler. So a lot to do and a lot to benefit from for our customers as well.
But Mr. Goh, you've already recording historic high profit. With that, do you really need this partnership?
Partnership has always been a very important strategic direction that we have been pursuing because, with one airline, there's a limit to how many points you can serve. But as you can see here with the operations that we are combining with ANA, we're going to offer a lot more destinations within Japan, for example. We're going to have 30 points on code share within Japan itself.
In 2024, the global air traffic saw a record high, and I was wondering, do you think this trend is likely to continue?
We are seeing robust demand still in the market, so we don't see why it should actually be deterred in terms of the ability for us to see good demand on our flight. Of course, you are well aware of the recent dynamic changes in the market as a result of, for example, the tariff that's been imposed by the US. We don't know what exactly will happen. It's too early to call, but you can be assured that we are monitoring.
But are you prepared to deal with this the tariff war that is taking place?
I think we're ready for any dynamic changes out there.
Something what the general public might be interested in is, are you offered an 8-month salary 2 years in a row to your staff? And this could be regarded as unprecedented.
I think the basic philosophy that we have is that we work as a team within the SIA group. And if there are challenges to address, the group, everybody would have to take necessary sacrifices. Just like what happened during the pandemic, where I would say that our people take significant pay cuts, for example, and adjustment to their workflow. I would say more so than many other airlines. And they also, we have an understanding within the organization that likewise, if the company were to do well, we want to be able to share that with our people.
Finally, I'd like to ask you, so what's next? What's most important for you going forward for SIA?
We all have to continue to ensure that we push the boundary, be bold, be innovative, and not be afraid to disband with long-established success formula.
Separately, ANA is also embarking on expansion, having ordered 77 new aircrafts. CEO Shinichi Inoue tells CNA he is cautiously monitoring the changing environment.
関税の話につきましてはですね、まだこの影響の度合いがどうなるかちょっとわからないので、今のところの影響はそんなにないです。ただそのトランプさんの方も、ご存知の通り、いろいろこう変わりますよね。ですからそれをよく見極めながら柔軟に対応していくようなそんな準備をしています。
Chinese e-commerce giants Temu and Shein are slashing their advertisement spending on US platforms such as Meta, X, Google, and YouTube. This comes as they wrestle with the end of US tax exemptions that have been key to sustaining their business model. Now, Temu cuts back on daily average spend by 31% in the first 2 weeks of April. Meanwhile, Shein's ad spend dropped 19% the same period. Now, the ad spending cuts follows Trump's new tariffs targeting Chinese imports previously benefiting from the de minimis rule, which exempted tax on goods valued under $800. Starting early next month, low-value packages from China are subject to duties of up to 90% or flat fees of up to $150. In response, Temu and Shein are raising their prices and even removing some products for US buyers. They're also shifting strategies. Temu is asking merchants to ship goods to US warehouses, while Shein is encouraging suppliers to move production to countries like Vietnam. Western rivals have previously criticized Temu and Shein for undercutting them and selling substandard goods. But analysts warn escalating US-China trade tensions could hurt big tech's ad revenues. Now, they also flag that American consumers may cut back on spending amid higher price tags and limited shopping options. Amid an escalating trade war between the US and China, Chinese tech giants have stepped up to support local exporters to expand domestically. Tencent says it'll launch a program on its WeChat platform, which will allow exporters to open online shops via a special channel. It'll also plans to help businesses expand in the Southeast Asian markets via a cross-border payment platform. It hopes that the initiative will bring in more than $13 billion in sales. ByteDance Douyin, that's China's TikTok, also says it will provide help to eligible businesses to reduce their reliance on overseas orders and operational costs. The company says it will offer up to $137,000 in capital credit and 45 days of interest-free financing for businesses setting up shop on its platform. Other players, including JD.com, with plans to spend more than $27 million over the next year to help manufacturers sell in the domestic market. And Alibaba's Fresh Hippo grocery chain says it'll expedite the onboarding process for exporters. And that'll do it for business. Wei Su.
And thanks for that, Roland. Still ahead on East Asia tonight, South Korea moves to resolve its 14-month standoff with trainee doctors and medical students. And India and 10 African countries staged their first joint naval drills in what is seen as part of New Delhi's efforts to counter Chinese influence in the region. This is East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Chinese President Xi Jinping warns against protectionism and power politics as he arrives in Cambodia for the third and final stop of his Southeast Asian tour. The leader has been shoring up regional support amid rising trade tensions with the United States. South Korea revising its medical school enrolment quota for 2026 in a bid to resolve a 14-month standoff with trainee doctors and medical students. And Japan's Prime Minister has cautioned that future tariff negotiations with the US will not be easy after trade delegation fails to win any immediate concessions with the Americans. Small businesses in China saying they have no choice but to adjust to President Trump's tariffs. But many will have to reconsider their options. CNA's Tan Si-hui has more from Beijing.
This bar owner may need more tricks up his sleeve as the US-China trade war spills over, affecting his business.
我觉得最大的影响就的确会影响大家的那个经济，然后所以大家可能赚的钱会变少一些，然后所以消费力都会下降，所以来店里消费可能本身可能一个人会消费200多，现在可能会100多。
Each bottle of whiskey from America cost up to 500 yuan, or about $70. The price is set to go up more, with China responding in kind to US tariffs.
其实我还是挺有信心，因为我觉得其实中国整个产业就是各个方面的那些产业就是都很完善，所以我觉得就算跟美国打一些关税的那些贸易战，所以我觉得影响不会太大，因为很多东西其实我们自己都是能够提供的，所以我觉得还好。
Mr. Meng says he'll likely replace American whiskey once they're sold out with European or homegrown brands that are set to enter the market in the next couple of years. Over at this market that mainly sells imported goods and caters to the expat community, the impact is keenly felt.
你看这个面粉啊，都是美国来的，这个卖完了都不卖了，买完了就没了，人家商家也不进货了，早都通知了我们，他说这个货买完了就没了，他说他订了一批货都退掉了。 人家都说特朗普疯子，他说不让卖了。
Madam Peng, who has peddled her wares at this market for the last 18 years, says these 2 years have been the hardest.
这样子下去，我们这摊位都好多人都待不下去了，待不了了，都不能干了。
Even before the tariff shock, China was already grappling with a host of structural challenges. Although it achieved its 2024 growth target with its economy expanding by 5%, consumers have been reluctant to spend amid a prolonged housing crisis and rising unemployment. Hefty U.S. tariffs will hit exports hard, disrupting another pillar of the Chinese economy. To mitigate the impact, China needs to sell more to other markets.
Europe and Japan the economies are meaningful, big enough, sizable enough to absorb China's excessive consumer goods exports, which means that China is definitely need to think about how to further collaborate with those countries so that those two economies can somehow willing to take more Chinese products.
Chinese President Xi Jinping appeared to extend an olive branch to Europe when he recently hosted Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez in Beijing, emphasizing that China and the European Union must stand against tariff bullying while calling on the West to support multilateralism and open cooperation. China was also seen as eager to strengthen trade ties with South Korea and Japan, with state media talking up trilateral trade ties after a high-level meeting in Seoul last month. Tan Si-hui, CNA, Beijing.
South Korea has lowered its medical school enrolment quota for 2026 in a bid to resolve a 14-month standoff with trainee doctors and medical students. Since February last year, thousands of physicians have walked away from their posts in protest at the Yoon administration's push to increase medical school admissions by 2,000 this year. But following Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment, the government has taken a U-turn on that policy. South Korea's education minister announcing that the medical school enrollment quota will return to the original 3,058. This is the same figure as last year, before the government proposed a quota expansion to address a chronic shortage of doctors in the country. The government had promised to reinstate the previous quota if all medical students resumed classes by the end of March, after more than a year of boycott. Our survey groups, including those advocating for patients, have criticized that move. Yonhap News, quoting the Korea Severe Disease Association, said that the suffering that patients had gone through in the hopes of seeing an improvement to the healthcare situation has all, quote, become meaningless. India and 10 African countries are forging closer ties this week as they stage their first joint naval drills. The exercises are taking place off the coast of Tanzania. They're aimed at countering threats like piracy and illegal fishing. But they're also seen as part of India's efforts to check China's rising influence in the region. Irshan reports from New Delhi.
India and Tanzania are co-hosting the inaugural Africa-India Key Maritime Engagement Drills. The Comoros, Djibouti, Eritrea, Kenya, Madagascar, Mauritius, Mozambique, Seychelles and South Africa are also participating. The military drills at sea include training personnel on anti-piracy operations, search and rescue missions, as well as intelligence sharing. Now, officials say that these war games will improve how Indian and African forces work together. But they say it also marks a new degree of confidence in relations between New Delhi and East Africa. Guarding this strategically key region is crucial to New Delhi. Maritime insecurity threatens trade and the lives of Indian and African citizens along the Mozambique Channel and the Gulf of Aden as well.
The Houthi rebels' activities in the Red Sea, that also led to all shipping diverting from Suez Canal, going around the African continent across the Indian Ocean. And here, the Mozambican channel is another choke point, which is important.
India says it wants to be seen as a top security partner and first responder in the region. Analysts say this is a sign that New Delhi is hoping to challenge China's influence in Africa. Beijing has invested billions of dollars across the continent through its Belt and Road Initiative, but its loans have also been criticized for being part of what critics call China's debt trap diplomacy. The military exercises are being seen as part of that outreach to show that India can be a dependable partner in the region.
You know, India is looking is promoting itself as a partner which is working in consensus, which is working on a cooperation model which promotes security, enhances collaboration, enhances economic security of the two countries.
During his visit to the African island of Mauritius in March, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the expansion of India's vision of maritime diplomacy, which includes security at sea as a key component. Experts say New Delhi is increasingly monitoring Chinese vessel activity in the region, and though the two countries' relations are improving on a bilateral level, they say their rivalry for influence in the Indian Ocean, which both see as their sphere of influence, is only heating up. Ishan Garg, CNA, New Delhi.
Still on East Asia tonight, we look at why Japan is lagging behind digitally and what it's doing to catch up on that front. I'll think Japan and you think of high-tech innovations, but alongside those bullet trains and lithium-ion batteries, you still have floppy disks, which were still in common use in government quarters last year. In 2024, Japan ranked 31st in digital competitiveness. CNA's Current Affairs program Insight digs deeper into why Japan is falling behind on this front.
Each day, Mr. Arami painstakingly handcarves tens of these personal seals known as hanko. In the 1870s, Japan's government passed a law requiring citizens to register custom-made hanko as a form of identification. This practice continues today.
日本ではハンコは実用的に使われる部分が一番多くて、サインの代わりにハンコをバンクアカウントだったり、あるいは区役所、市役所の不動産契約とかで使うことが多くて。
Almost all Japanese adults have at least one hanko. Many organizations prefer using these personal stamps to digital signatures. For example, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, almost 60% of people working from home had to go to the office at least once a week to stamp documents. So, in 2020, the Japanese government stamped out the hanko for over 14,000 administrative procedures.
At that time, Japan did a lot of change because, we cannot touch the paper, we cannot do human interactions. So digital transformation is needed. You can make the process more efficient by digital transformation.
Yet, letting go of the hanko has been easier said than done. These personal seals are still required for 83 administrative procedures like registering a vehicle or company. On marriage, divorce, and other forms, a space remains for people to stamp the hanko.
紙があるのにハンコをなくすのは無理があるし、そうすることによってハンコ屋さんが食べていけなくなっているから、もうより戻してほしい。
The persistence of the hanko and other outdated tech like floppy disks and fax machines is an outcome of Japanese culture. The Japanese score extremely high on uncertainty avoidance, meaning they do not like change, a trait which shows up in the slow pace of digital transformation.
まずあんまり新しい制度にをどんどん受け入れていくっていう国民性ではないですよね。やっぱり今までのやり方だと安心だしとか、やっぱり安心を感じたい気持ちが多分日本の人は強いと思うので、今までのやり方だったら、確実にちょっと面倒くさいかもしれないけど確実に安心でできる。あとデジタルに抵抗ある方、特に年配の方とかだと 多いと思うので。
Japan is the world's fastest aging society. Almost 3 in 10 Japanese are over 65 years old. In Japan, a 2021 study found that a third of older adults were lukewarm towards the idea of digitalization. But surprisingly, the young are also reluctant to adopt change.
And we're joined in the studio by producer Shauna Tan from Inside. Now, you are behind that report, yes, Shauna?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I am.
Right, okay. Right, then you would know all about it. Now, COVID-19, as it did for many things, sped up the process. So earlier we saw in your package, the digital transformation, there have been moves in that direction even before 2019, 2020, but COVID-19 really put fire under that effort.
Right. So the Japanese government realized during the COVID-19 pandemic that it really struggled with processes relating to data collection, data analysis, things like contact tracing or verifying travelers' documents. I think those challenges made the Japanese government realize that, oh, we need to do something to digitize all our administrative processes. So that's really what happened and led to the establishment of the digital agency in 2021. So that's the digital agency's mission, is to streamline and digitize all of the Japanese government's administrative procedures and work with other government agencies to digitize other parts of Japan in terms of business contracts, for example.
All right, so anecdotally, the translator there said in Japan, there's a general reluctance to embrace change. Japanese score, and I quote, extremely high on uncertainty avoidance, meaning they do not like change. And many of us do not like change as well. The Japanese, are they particularly, they score particularly strong? Is there evidence to show that? Is that the main reason why they are not so competitive on digital tech?
There are definitely many more reasons than just the reluctance to change. But I think that reluctance to change is definitely one of the main issues behind this problem. And one of the experts shared with me actually that in Japan, there's this tradition of perfecting a system. And once the system is perfected, maintaining that system for its entire life cycle, making sure that you could use it for as long as possible. And that's the reason why, sometimes Japanese processes, Japanese systems become outdated compared to the rest of the world's digital norms. Yeah.
Low priority of IT and cybersecurity as well compared to other operational and business needs. So in a company, for example, there's less emphasis on we need to keep up on the digital front. Other things take priority. Is that also your experience doing this report?
Yeah, exactly. I think we are seeing that the Japanese economy is moving very slowly. I mean, it's on an upward trend now, but Japanese companies are realizing that they are running out of funds to pay their workers. Wages need to go up somehow, and the money needs to come from somewhere, and it cannot go to things like digital transformation, things like maintaining cybersecurity. So we are realizing that because cybersecurity and because digitalization is becoming less of a priority for some companies, they are having a lot of trouble trying to adopt these technologies and also hire the right talent that is able to promote digitalization within the company itself.
All right, in your report, an example, I suppose, reflecting this desire to keep with old traditions, so the hanko or hanko, this seal that people use in lieu of actually signing or digital signatures, as an example. When you were filming this episode, did you see other examples that for you were surprising, reflecting an older way of life?
Right, I think it's definitely interesting being in Japan, knowing all of these popular culture representations of Japan as this cyberpunk universe and seeing, among all these billboards, LED billboards, big signs, there are still phone boxes. I mean, probably they haven't been used for a while, but they're still there. And I think what was most shocking to me was walking into an electronics store, seeing a row of fax machines, and more than that, an aisle of AM radio. So I think we all know that, FM radio is pretty popular and it's basically the norm these days, but they are still making new models of AM radio, even though there was a label at the top saying, AM radio frequencies will be phased out by 2028. Why are they still there? I'm assuming that, many Japanese, or at least there is a significant proportion of Japanese, who still rely on this technology.
Okay, reliance on existing technology. And I'll sum up all these points. This is the final question here. So a cultural aversion to change, I generalize there. And you were saying as well, businesses, the priority for spending may not go on things digital, and reliance. And so that kind of feeds each other. How would you sum up the challenges that Japan faces as it tries to move faster on digital transformation? Final question.
I think one is definitely resources, right? The Japanese population is not getting any younger. And we are seeing that by 2030, they will have a tech shortage or tech worker shortage of 500,000. That's a lot of people. And where are you going to find all of these tech workers? Most of them will have to be skilled in things like advanced manufacturing, AI, Internet of Things. So what the Japanese government is trying to do is that it is trying to woo its younger population into tech careers, but it's really struggling because, that takes time. And the other thing is that, another thing it could do is hire foreign workers, but there's also an aversion to foreign workers that is easing, but it's still there. Another challenge will definitely be cybersecurity. As digital transformation continues, that also means more cyber risks. And from my conversations with my own Japanese friends, I think data protection is not really a priority. It's more of an afterthought. And at least in my own experience, I use a payment app in Japan, and it's been 3 years since I've set up the account. I have not been locked out of it. My session has not timed out. My password is basically useless because I don't have to key it in. That's very concerning to me. So I think all of these trends are really concerning for the Japanese government. They are realizing there is a problem, but they do need to fight against their people's way of life.
All right, most of us do not like change, with Japan reflecting perhaps a larger picture globally. Thanks so much for coming in. That report of yours, Shona Tan from Insight on our current affairs program in CNA. Thank you. And you can watch Japan's digital leg on Insight tonight, 9 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time, right here on CNA, or catch up on CNA Video on Demand and CNA Insider's YouTube page. And some other headline news from media outlets in East Asia. Kyodo News says a Chinese man convicted of killing a Chinese woman and injuring 2 Japanese nationals in a knife attack has been executed. The incident took place at a school bus stop in Jiangsu province in June last year. The victim, a bus attendant, had come to the aid of a mother and her child who were stabbed. The South Korea Yonhap News says movie theatres saw a sharp decline in attendance and sales in March. Local cinemas selling 6.4 million tickets, that's down 45%, or by about 5.3 million tickets from the previous month. Revenue plunging by nearly half from February. Officials say the absence of recent box office hits is a key factor in that. China Daily, meanwhile, reporting a strong rebound in the Chinese pet industry. An industry platform paper says the urban consumption market for dog and cat products surpassed $41 billion in 2024, climbing 7.5% on year. That's fueled by an increasingly young pet-owning demographic and changes in purchasing behavior, including a preference for fresher, higher quality options. And that's East Asia tonight. Don't forget headlines anytime at cna.asia, plus we're on Facebook and YouTube.